on this computer. Okay, it is restored.
Was it just paused or was it a completely new recording?
It had actually been terminated, so this is a new recording.
All right, so it'll be part one and part two.
Yes, unfortunately.
Not that very many people go back and watch them, but
Hey, there's one recently that got 52 views. Last I checked, which was about a week ago.
by 52 different people.
That I can't tell.
I know. That's the problem. Could be the same person playing it more than once.
But there are various different geolocations from which these viewers come from, so they're not all the same person.
Could also be scrapers that they're not real people, they're scrapers.
Hey, if somebody considers us scrapable, that's okay.
Well, yeah, but because they want to get our likeness and our voice so they can pretend to be us with our own correct voice.
Yeah, well, that's
Taylor Swift effect and the Joe Biden effect, where they look like you and they sound like you, but the words coming out of your mouth aren't yours.
Oh, there's plenty of fun being had at Trump's expense now with that technology.
Well, yeah, especially if you're a female and you get this fake porn stuff coming up like Taylor Swift had.
So anyway, my original question, Sam, is I came across an article and I had pasted it into the chat transcript. I don't know if you can reach back in the history, but if you like, I can repost it, where it questions my belief or my position, which I've been living to for the last decade or more, which is that the only way to live life is to lean forward, to lean into life, as opposed to being pessimistic and sitting back and being cynical and being sarcastic. And I think that an optimistic view seems to be a good way to live life. However, I ran across this article which said, and it was in the context of entrepreneurs, that optimism is often associated with bad decision making. So Barry and I got into this discussion where he says, hey, he's been pessimistic now for 4 decades. And so versus the pessimistic versus optimistic view, Barry offered the realistic view and said he's a pessimistic realist. So I then further separated 2 stages of consideration. One is if you're a realist, it means that whatever you think, the model in your head is what you claim to be real and what you think corresponds to the real world. So I said, okay, so suppose that there's a stage of this consideration where you're actually coming up or where you're telling the story or you're evolving this model. Okay. Then there's a second stage, which is, okay, now the model tells you something. How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to make that model actionable? So I think there's 2 considerations here. And that's why we got into this little side conversation about climate change and Sabine Hassenfelder and whether or not that was supposed to be realistic or pessimistic or optimistic. But I still think the 2 stages of consideration to me seem useful. In other words, there's a lot of depressed people, there's a lot of people who've given up, who don't even care about evolving their model. They don't even care about evolving their story. They just accept what they're told or they believe what they believe. That's it. Okay. And they're just going to act on that. And that can make them optimistic or pessimistic either way. But for people who actually are ready and able to ingest and consume and adapt to new information or other people's models, then there's a learning that's possibly enabled and empowered. And then that can then inform the actions that you choose to take based on whatever models in your head or that you've decided to adopt. So I think there's those 2 separate realms or considerations. One is, do you even have the energy to come up with a model or to learn anything? And the second is, okay, whatever you're learning, whatever you're putting together as a model, it could have pretty dire predictions. It could be pretty pessimistic, but that's not the pessimism I'm talking about. The pessimism or optimism I'm questioning is, how do you engage with that model? Do you lean into that model, or do you take a pessimistic view simply because the model tells you to be pessimistic? That's my question. Over.
Thank you. This is, you give me a quick summary of what you guys talk about, and I'm smiling because you're asking me. I've been studying this for almost 50 years. Pay attention to it. So I'm running a multi-million-dollar company also helped me to be real. I'm the experimental physicist to test out the theory, because almost 30 years ago, I almost become a business consultant because I think I can handle it. But then I decided that, nah, I'm going to do it on my own so I can be more direct and be able to disprove, practical practice and not practice and all that stuff. So anyway, make a long story short, in multiple ways, yeah, bandwidth is what I call energy resources, whether you have enough, that's really important. And the other important topic you didn't talk about is that, are you stuck with it? Some people are stuck with it and it's pessimistic. And when they're stuck with it, they don't have a choice. When they don't have a choice, it's sort of, you go to fortune teller, they tell you that your life will be good, then you sit on your butt and watch TV all day long and see what happens. So when you're stuck in the state, you have no choice. When you have no choice, you're pretty hopeless. So that's the other important thing. So the question is, what do you want? Okay? In some situation, so for example, I want to stand up right now. It has nothing to do with whether I am pessimistic or optimistic. I can still stand up unless I move my butt and stand on my leg. I won't be able to stand up. So the result of whatever you're trying to do has nothing to do with pessimistic or optimistic. It has something to do with what is required. It's like a transmission gear. When all the clutches is right in place, the gear will engage and the things will happen. Things happen has multiple factors, right? So anyway, so sometimes illusion is good, sometimes overthinking is bad, sometimes overthinking is good. So it's like, oh, what do you want? So for example, right? If I talk to a sick person that have cancer on the sick bed, really, it's very sad. The only way I can make this person happy is that I bring this person to the very basement of the hospital where all the dead people are in the cabinet, in the drawer. When they see that, it's like, okay, it's more pessimistic and more negative than you, then I'm good. So again, this is the trick that I use all the time. Like when somebody say they are poor, I show them some people that poorer than that. Somebody remember there's a story that about one person with a shoe, I show them a person without legs, something along that line. It's like, pessimistic is useful if you know how to make use of it. Know how do you make use of it? If you flip it around, it's like, there's a situation that it is useful. It's not that you'll never be useful, but it is useful. So the question is, are you able to unlock the door, unlock the trouble so that you can get the result that you want? So anyway, I can go on and on and on. The key is that you can, there's mental state, there's physical state, there's a factor that you know, and that's you have experience, you have feedback, troubleshooting. Unless you know how to troubleshoot. Like my wife was in hospital for 6.5 months. I was in my major troubleshooting mode. I use spiritual, I use prayers, I use this, I use this. I talk to feng shui, and you name it, I done it all. I tell the whole world that I need help. I call the doctors around the world to match the case. I go to Stanford Hospital to get the case to match. So problem solving has nothing to do with any of the pessimism. The question is, do you have a compelling reason that keep you going and try different things and read the feedback and have the feedback help you to decide on the next step? Over. When you start selling the pessimistic and optimistic state, you're derailed. So the focus is about result. If you want the result, you have a compelling reason to get the result. You stay with it. It's like a good berry, like go straight to the facts, the ground truth,
So let's take Barry's story about Sabine Hassenfelder and her predictions about climate change.
Okay.
Barry said that is a very pessimistic model. I believe that was the way Barry characterized it. So to me, the model is neither pessimistic nor optimistic. It's how you choose to engage with the model. So does it make you get off your butt? Or do you throw up your hands and say, we're all screwed? It's a matter of whether it's 10 years or 15 years, but we're all screwed anyway. And that's the conversation I hear a lot of people go through. Whereas if you're in information gathering mode, and if you're in acting mode and you're results oriented, see, to me, that's an optimistic mode because that's energized. You're actually engaging with a model. You're trying to take action. But there's a lot of people who will not do that.
But I think from the perspective of what I just hear so far, if I may, okay, I'm going to reframe it a little bit, is that you label certain pessimistic because this is what the common people can relate the language they use, because that words means that it's hopeless, it's bad, it's we really need to do something about it. Otherwise, if it's optimistic, it's like, who cares? You'll be fine. Why do we need to pay attention to it? So it's like the optimistic, the word was an invoke action, require mindset. That's the way I think about it. When someone say optimistic, pessimistic, is like I said, do I need to do anything about it? If it's optimistic, the money is coming. Okay, I'm optimistic about it, so I don't have to do a squat, and everything will be fine. But if it says this is a pessimistic situation, you need to pay attention to it, you need to do something about it, okay, that's fine. So it's a description of the state. It has nothing to do with problem solving. It's irrelevant.
Okay. So I'm dealing with macro conditions. Okay. So let me tell you where I'm pessimistic. Okay. I hear what you're saying, but I am very pessimistic when it comes to the current state of the country and the level of education and the level of discourse and the level of decision making around community, regions, even at the national level. Okay. I think there's a absence of education. There is an absence of rational thought. There is certainly an absence of systemic thinking at all levels. So you don't even have to talk about systemic thinking. You just have to talk about whether people understand basic logic and can understand, basic facts. And the amount of airtime I see spent on lies in the media is depressing. So, in that context, I am pessimistic. So, I admit that does not keep me from taking action, but it is pessimistic in terms of potential outcomes that I see. So that's my current case study. Over.
Thank you. If I may jump in right now again, is that when you talk about pessimistic, I thought about the simplest ground truth situation that I can give you the example. When I'm going through driving, okay, I'm going through an intersection. If I'm pessimistic about this intersection, I'll be doing my defensive driving. I don't care if it's green light for the last 10 seconds, I still wait until make sure the car passed me because it's speeding 100 miles an hour going from the other direction, or whatever you want to call that. So I'll be in my pessimistic mode dealing with the situation. That's useful, okay? So again, now, the trouble is that when you say, well, this is how you should be driving all the time, then you're overgeneralization. So when you overgeneralization, then you sort of like, which one are you talking about? So you won't be very specific about it. So it's not very useful when you generalize it when there's a topic about, I'm pessimistic about world, I'm pessimistic about life. Like, how do you deal with the damn thing? Like, this is it, we're done, So, but you talk about intersection, I'm driving, we're good. So if I may, when you use pessimistic, it's like, so this is how I think about it, be more useful. It's like when somebody give me pessimistic view, I say, oh, good, I'm so glad you give me a viewpoint. I'm not going to put positive or negative about it. It's like, let's see if I can do something about it so that it's useful for all of us. I'm not going to waste my time like that. Just say, you so stupid. You're wasting all the time bandwidth and you be so pessimistic. It's like, how the hell is that going to help? No, it doesn't help anything. I say, well, sorry. I'm so glad that you tell me your perspective and your viewpoint, I am incapable of giving you the result that you're looking for. So I can't help you. So maybe next one person can help you. That's why I shared the David Barry's information with Heiner. You got the email? So this is what this is how I deal with it. So the question is, I put it on myself. It's my responsibility to be useful or not useful. If I'm not useful, then I'm wasting your time as well. If I'm complaining to you, you're pessimistic. What the hell am I doing? I'm derailing you from doing the things that you're supposed to be doing or whatever can be done. It's not very useful. I'm sorry, but this is how I feel. Okay, so hopefully this is the ground truth of how I feel. I'm not trying to honeycomb it.
No, thank you for sharing how you feel. I'm not talking about people. I'm not talking about specific individuals. I'm talking about the macro conditions. And those macro conditions can inform individual action. That's the connection I'm seeking to make. And I'm doing that on my own. But there's a macro situation at the level of the United States that to me needs a lot of action, needs a lot of attention. It's undergone decades of degradation. I'm talking about the education system. I'm talking about the quality of political discourse. I'm talking about even the quality of political candidates.
Well, if I may, a useful action would be something like educate, so that people can do the right thing. So that's the focus you need. Not complaining, put people down, right? So that's that. So versus education versus complaining. So that's one perspective. The other perspective would be the example, just like Barry, okay? Instead of throwing away old junk, he recycled it. That's positive. That's useful. Like for me, like I know about the solar panel. So okay, I will invest it. I want to do it myself. So be the example, like what Gandhi is saying. So I'm the example, and hopefully I can learn from the example. See, it will be practical for you to be, doing what I'm doing here. So be the example, educate. I think that's most useful than any other action that, I'm trying to do this. I'm doing it on my own. How is that helping? Does it fit anything, any of the education and be the example? I don't know. I'm not seeing it.
So 2 points. This forum is not where I'm talking about the action that I'm taking. I am taking action. This forum is a chance to take perspectives and see if there's a way to magnify the effects. So no, I don't need to come here and tell you what I'm doing from an education standpoint or from a changing the world standpoint. I mean, we can get into that if that's the topic and into several other topics if you like. But that's not the reason I raised the question. Asking the question does not mean that I'm not taking action. Asking the question means I'm actually bringing up the fact this is the way that business talks about engaging with quote unquote reality. That an article like this gets published.
So first of all, before I go on further, Heiner, did you get my email?
Sorry, I will. It is so interesting what you're saying here.
Thank you.
That I feel I jump in. You see, Sam Chan, I see you the pragmatic, and Sam Han, you're more like the jester. You're trying to put out questions which may be empty because you're not saying which positionality, which perspective, which frame of references. And then you can tell a lot of interesting questions, but they are idle. What I see you both doing is this maybe Chinese tradition of Wu Wei, which is not doing anything or sitting in the bamboo hind and just playing this Book of the Thousand Flowers Land of Zhangzi or Chuang Tzu, or however you call him. It is this, I'm not involved, I'm the real Taoist, and I cannot move, because if I don't know the direction, then I might move as much as I can in the wrong direction. So it's sometimes very good to step back and to really see what is going on. And what we did with our 30 young people there in Dubai was looking into how is the young generation reacting. And they have lost overview, they have lost orientation. They are either getting afraid, aggressive, ignorant, or they think now they are a king and can rule the world. And I had some discussions with our young, professional journalists also, who said, yes, we were able to ask questions the politicians couldn't answer, or were puzzled a moment, and then they fall back into their jargon. So anyway, it is very frustrating, and what some say is about education, for sure. But all this education did not really help, because our science system, like history of science and whatever, they have excluded humanities and social sciences. It's most of these people are natural sciences, or they are economists, or they are lawyers. So they don't understand each other. So anyway, I love listening to you, and I think we should really settle back and make sure we are running in the right direction, because what we are doing here with CO2 and ignoring methane, or ignoring the cultural dimensions, or the social dimensions, or the suffering, as I mentioned earlier, we might get very, very lost. And I didn't see much learning the last 30 years. All these obvious trends, like you cannot eat more than you can swallow, or there are limits to growth, that's very important. There's even a limit to aging for a living natural being. So we have to discuss all the basic issues, like what is a boundary? Anyway, I didn't want to talk. I will try to find out if I get a message.
Thank you. So I want to education. So when I use the word education, I would say that, where there's ground truth, that's all the, what do you call that? The bearing thing, dealing with the useful education in general. I'm using as a general terms instead of like I'm not saying that current education is perfect. No, it's like if we educate each other and they give a lot of feedback and all that, sooner or later the true education, so I say the useful education, the effective education will show up. And this is why, we need people like Barry and all that stuff to check the ground truth, to make sure that, the becoming, this is what I like to say, is like the becoming. So whatever becoming, sooner or later, it will show up, because we can see, because we are experiencing it. And the one important thing is that the compelling reason that we have all the time is the survival, the need to survive. The need for survival is very strong, so that it will automatically give us the compelling reason that we need to clean up our act, we need to make sure it's better, it's all that good stuff. Over.
It occurs to me that if you really don't know which way to run, because you can't reliably predict what's going to happen if you run this away or that away, then your optimal practice is to hide, stay out of sight, and wait and see. And most people who are wise but uneducated, uninformed, just say, "I'll wait and see," because they haven't a clue which way is going to work. The dangerous ones are the ones who are so self-deluded and so self-assured and so arrogant that they'll run hell-mel over the edge of the cliff and take the herd with them.
That's what I used to think. My more advanced version is that you run regardless in circles, so to practice your muscle, so the next time when you're ready to run, you have a strong muscle to can go faster.
Yeah, but then you're visible. If being visible is a danger because you're prey, you're food, then being invisible, there's fight, flight, and freeze. Fight, if you think you can win. Flight, if you can run away and you know which way is away, and freeze, which is hide and be unseen, as the third option. Often that's the optimal option if you live in a dangerous world. People are nuts.
I see. You're in the survival dog eat dog world, right? Okay.
And I don't want to be an eaten dog. So
yeah.
So fight, flight, freeze. And then there's a whole bunch more. I mean, there's this long list that begins with fight, flight, and freeze, and it goes on for like, I don't know, a dozen different alternatives after that.
Sam, go for it.
I also don't subscribe to that model. I think too often when you need too much compelling case to decide A or B, then you don't act. And too often that enables oppression in the case of, situations of oppression. So we know about the Holocaust. We know about the bombing in Gaza. We know about Black Lives Matter. We know about Ukraine. We know about the US Civil War. We know about misogyny. So the people who need more information to decide A or B just enable the oppression that continues.
Or you run
So I
away.
think-
My great-grandparents ran away from the Pale of Settlement in Eastern Europe.
So that's not freezing. See, that's not freezing.
Because they knew that they could get to the New World in the late.
I'm talking against freezing. That is not freezing.
It is.
That is flight.
But they knew that they could get to the New World and start a new life. Back in 1880, 1890, they knew that. And they did. A lot of people got the hell out of Eastern Europe while the getting was good. And those who stuck around, ended up in the Holocaust. But they knew they knew that there was a way out.
Okay, so in theory, you could say the people in Gaza could get out, whether it's practical or not. Okay, but in the US, when let's say there's many examples of misogyny, a woman cannot get out. A woman cannot get out of that state of being a woman. A child eventually gets out of the state of being a child, but a woman never gets out of the state of being a woman. So in the cases of oppression against women, let's say sex trafficking, let's say, body sovereignty, let's say genital mutilation, let's say, power dynamics. Those are situations where we cannot sit on the sideline and wait. We cannot freeze. That's why I don't subscribe to this wait and see mode as a viable mode.
It's one of a dozen options. It's a common one. It's a common one for people to say.
It is very common.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's the safest thing to do because anything else is less safe.
I'll go back to what Heiner was talking about, Wu Wei. The way I understand Wu Wei, and I'll give you an example of how I practice Wu Wei without knowing the Wu Wei yet. Many, many, many years ago, where there's Vesical and Lotus 1, 2, 3 is showing up. Remember those days?
Yeah, VisiCalc and Vote is
right?
one.
All that stuff. So
And super
I was going to learn it, and then I was like, no, it's too complicated. I don't want to learn it. I wait until it's easy enough for me to learn it. So I waited enough so that the easier to use Lotus 123 showed up or Excel showed up. Then I start learning them. So that's the way I deal with Wu Wei. It's like you find the easiest path, to find the shortest path, and then once you find the shortest path, then you can do it. So it's sort of like swimming along with the flow of the river instead of trying to wait against. So it's like if I walk higher enough that I can swim it, I can go with the flow. It's not so I call it an instantaneous flow. It's not like a long-term flow, but it's you catch it at the right flow. I'm just doing it in the way that it's the least amount of energy that allow me to accomplish the thing I'm trying to accomplish. That's the way I think about Wu Wei.
When I was in 7th grade, my father suggested to me that I consider a career in engineering. Why? Because engineerings are in short supply and in demand, and he knew that I had aptitude to become a successful engineer. And he was right, because he was already a scientist. He was a practicing chemist. So sometimes you can have an authority figure who you trust, who can steer you in the right direction, and you basically take their word for it. I took my dad's word for it that pursuing science and math and engineering would yield me a livelihood, and he was right. But I also know a lot of people pursued engineering and didn't do very well and didn't get any job offers, or got crappy job offers.
To me, that sounds like that used to be called family. In multi-generational cultures, families influenced each other that way.
Yep.
In nuclear family cultures, oh, I can do it on my own. I'm going to strike out on my own. Bleep what my parents say, bleep what the elders say. I'm going to live life for myself, blah, blah, blah. Right? But that used to be called family.
Well, there still is family. It's just not as, what's the word I'm looking for, prominent as it used to be in the 1950s. Post-war, family was a big deal. It's not, I keep hearing, more and more people are living a life that's not family-oriented life compared to the decade in which I grew up in the 50s and 60s.
Well, I think of the family that we talk about here is actually more as a result of the agriculture, society or whatever you call that. So you need all the people, as many people as you can, so they can farm the land and harvest, together and all that stuff. So
Live
that's
in an urban society, and so nowadays the children go off into these urban centers to get jobs in the urban centers and not on the farmland.
yeah.
Farmland is basically automated to the
Yeah.
maximum degree.
So with the family, influence family is you're limited to the smaller pool of the people. So at the most 20, 30, maybe 300 people in this pool. Instead of if someone that's outside of your family that has the knowledge or have the wisdom to tell you, here, this is where you go to ride, you'll find a lot of fruit trees or something along that line.
Well, you see, we realize, working very much with youth and students, tutors are very much in demand. Everybody as a young guy says, well, do the thinking for me, do the writing for me, be my master, be my tutor. And that is really coming up as an indicator that the youth are searching. And that is a very good sign.
Searching for survival.
Yep. Or survive better.
My parents' biggest fear, which they transmitted to me unspoken, was fear of annihilation, because they had lived through the Holocaust years and they weren't convinced that, my generation wasn't going to experience something similar. Turned out I had fear of annihilation that I silently inherited from my parents' generation. It was an unspoken fear.
That's why be the example is so important. You somehow influence people. You call it mirror neurons. You call it whatever you want to call it. Be the example is such an important factor in every way you shape.
But in actuality, my selling it fear was fear of failure, because I knew that success meant I was going to have a livelihood and failure meant I was going to be out of luck. And so I was really driven by fear of failure, not fear of annihilation. And then after that, it was fear of boredom. I wanted to do something interesting. An awful lot of people take boring jobs because they can get a livelihood, but they're bored to tears with their life. And then they escape into fantasy land. They go into these fantasy escapism fantasy because real life is boring, but they can make a living at it.
See, that triggered a thought in me that was the negative, the downside, the pessimistic view of multi-generational cultures. I have for my entire life heard the stories about how my grandfather's hospital was bombed by the US Air Force and how I lost my oldest aunt in that story, and how my grandfather had to rebuild the hospital. Now, for the entire life of my dad's generation and my generation and my kids' generation regarding Taiwan, China looms over the future of Taiwan. So yes, there is a multi-generational fear of annihilation from that family history, in my case, also.
Yep.
So in that way, I kind of relate, but it's different, obviously.
Thank you for sharing that. What I'm looking for is that, okay, how is a gift? Where's a gift for all this? And what is that? How is it? You are becoming who you are just because of the gift.
And I see that.
Yeah.
I see that also as the oldest son of the oldest son.
Yeah. And that's a gift. You have a lot of power that no other people have. You be the role model for the entire generations, multiple generations. Boredom has a gift. Fear has a gift. So the question is, how can I make use of the gift and, liberate myself from that gift? It was useful until it's no longer useful, then you got to chuck it. So pessimistic has served a purpose and is useful in many ways. You have to understand that, like, I grew up in a family of, my dad was making $30 a month, feeding 88 siblings. And coming to America is like, no way. So the question is, my employees gonna say, oh, the customer's asking for me to sell the price below my cost. I say, it has nothing wrong with the customer. It's something wrong with you. All you need, your job is to find someone that can sell to you below the price that they're trying to ask for. Then you're all good. And the other thing that I always tell my employees that customer does not pay for your emotion. So don't waste your emotion on the customer or the supplier. Just do whatever needs to be done and get it over with, to be done with it.
Waste your emotion, quote unquote. Waste your emotion on steering your educational agenda.
Yeah.
That's what emotion is for.
Exactly. Most people don't think about it that way. But to my mind, your emotions tell you what's your frontier of learning that you need, frontier of research, frontier of education that you need to attend to now or in the near term. If you have anxiety, it's because you don't have mastery. If you have mastery, you have confidence.
Yeah.
Well, anxiety and confidence are polar opposites. to get out of anxiety and into confidence, get mastery. How do you get mastery? Study, study, study your ass off.
Yeah.
Research.
Yeah.
Practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice. Get to Carnegie Hall and, you know, get a tutor if you need one, you know, go to the library, you know, burn the midnight oil and get out of anxiety by mastering what you don't know how to do.
Yeah. It reminds me of my assembly language class. I must have flipped open the same page 1,000 times.
Fortunately, I didn't have to learn assembly language. By the time I got around to learning, it was Fortran and PL1 were the frontier languages in those days. And
8-bit assembly. Love it.
I learned PL1 and I was able to actually, you know, get some mileage out of knowing PL1 because I was one of the few people who had learned a relatively powerful modern language which could do things that Fortran could do things that COBOL could do things that ALGOL could do, all in one language.
Right? Unless you learn assembly language, you have no idea how to program the microprocessor in a very basic level.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do that because I was working on the IBM 360 and 1620, which worked in high-level languages, Fortran and PL1.
Why do you think that Ohio State has a 75% dropout rate for electrical engineering classes?
What percent?
75% dropout rate.
Yeah, I can believe it.
We started with about a couple thousand students in electrical engineering and end up with 36 students graduating 4 years later.
But when I went into engineering, my brother, who's a year older, also started out pursuing engineering, and he dropped out right away because he couldn't hack the math.
Yep.
He knew he couldn't hack the math because he kept asking me to do his math homework for him in grammar school, and I wouldn't do it for him. I would try to explain to him how to do the math. He says, I don't want to learn how to do it. I just want you to do it for me. I wouldn't do it for him. So he basically, you know, ended up in accounting where it was just arithmetic. He made a career
There's
out.
a lot of people like that in society.
He's still
and they hold a lot of influence and they vote.
He's still keeping the books for his son's business. His son has a building company, construction company, and my brother, who's 80 years old, is still doing the books. He's still doing, you know, Excel and accounting because it's just adding and subtracting. There's no algebra involved.
I always remind people that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything else. If you are the hammer, everything you see is a nail. So it's like that's how people work. So if you use that to generalize it the rest of the world and dealing with climate change or whatever, it makes no difference at all whatsoever.
Right. Immediately go and given any problem whatsoever, immediately go into Hilbert space and never come out again.
Yeah.
You know, it was decades before I even understood that climate change could be even discussed as a political issue. Because I heard about it way back in the early 80s when, you know, even early indications were being discussed, and I attended those there weren't webinars in those days. They were actual real physical seminars. I saw the data. I saw what people were collecting. I saw the changes over eons. I saw, you know, how they were doing the analysis. And for that to even be brought into question as a political issue is unbased in science, and it's not based in looking at the actual research that's been done. And yet it's legitimized by media who don't understand, and by voters who obviously don't understand. And it's being taken advantage of by political adherents who don't want to understand. That is a sad state of society, and that is the pessimism that I'm talking about.
Why there's always a need to label such thing as pessimistic? I don't quite get it. How is labeling this a pessimistic help the whole situation make it? Is that a generalization or is that
okay? So here's the thing, okay? If you are in a pot and it is 85 degrees, you're not going to move, right? It's quite comfortable. But if it's 105 degrees or 110 degrees, you will move.
Okay.
So
Out of-
I
out of the-
need to make the discomfort sufficient so that people will take action. And
Okay.
some people take action by education. That's great. That's what we want to see. Other people can't.
So my basic question is that how is labeling it a pessimistic, optimistic help people move?
The situation is dire. And if people don't understand that the situation is dire, then we have to communicate in multiple different ways.
Okay.
If people cannot just accept rational discourse or papers or scientific thought or leading scientists giving 3-minute sound bites, then we have to try other things.
Got it. So you're saying that if I label something as pessimistic, there's a chance that someone will move because I label it as such.
Yeah, because it's not going to appeal to everybody, but some people will hear that message.
So when they
But
hear the word
that's not even the
pessimistic,
most optimal delivery of the message. It is clearly not the most optimal delivery of the message.
got it.
But for people who are sitting on the sidelines doing nothing, they've got to get to some level of action, and they got to try multiple different ways of communicating that. Because the people that are just sitting on the sidelines are just letting the bad situation get worse.
So what's
Sitting on
working
the
so
sidelines is not an option.
understood. The question is, what has been working so far, and what can we learn from those actions that is working?
Oh, there's a lot that's working, right? So we have lots of people, lots of countries, lots of research institutions, lots of papers, lots of data collection, lots of models now. That's all excellent. The problem is that we still need to get that thinking into the people that manage and control our assets and our decision making. The people locally, regionally, geographically, and nationally, and globally need to get this perspective. That's the fight that Heiner's been fighting for 30 or 40 years. And it's the one that is necessary. I am not disputing the fact that there's a lot of research being done. It's not hitting the right levels of influence yet. That's what needs to be done.
So what's the action item for the end of the day for us?
See, this is where I would say I am seriously considering after retirement, maybe I have to do it sooner, actually running for political office. I encourage you to run for political office.
No
Okay?
way.
No, do not laugh. Do not laugh. Okay? I'll give you a story. Did I tell you the story about how this guy in Taiwan is now the president of Taiwan? Did I tell you that story?
No.
Do you know his professional training?
I forgot. I watched it one time. Yeah.
He's actually a medical doctor.
Okay.
And in Taiwan, the smartest, the people that want to help society the most, they become doctors. That's the most revered profession of all possible professions, in Asia, or at least in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And so he, at one time, was a student of my third uncle, who actually has run the hospital that used to be run by my grandfather.
Hmm.
And at that time, William Lai came to my uncle and said, "How can I be a better doctor?" And my uncle said, "You're a good doctor. Taiwan has lots of good doctors. We don't have enough honest politicians." He then decided to become a politician. He then eventually, over time, became the vice president for England, and now he's the president of Taiwan.
Okay. Thank you.
So people who have influence today don't have a good grounding in scientific thought, in even systemic ethics, in systemic thinking, in even just basic empathy for other people. And my grandfather, my grand uncle, no, my actual uncle encouraged him to go into politics. And he's making a difference, I believe, or will start making a bigger influence. That's why I say to people like you, and look, I was like you 10 years ago. I said, politics, that's for, other people. That's not for me. In fact, I said worse things in my 20s. I said politics is for people who can't do things. You know, if you can do things, you know, you don't go into politics. Boy, was I wrong. Politics is doing something. It's just a different thing than the STEM kind of things that, you know, we're familiar with. By the way, in addition to politics, I have a recently deep appreciation for sociology. It's fascinating. We need to understand ourselves at the macro level.
Yeah.
You understand people very well at the one-on-one level. We need to influence people at the macro level. We could all be little, you know, hummingbirds, you know, carrying our little drops of water into the rainforest, okay? But what if all those little, you know, hummingbirds could all just work together? That's the possibility. That's why I'm not pessimistic. I bring up the question of pessimism versus optimism, but I'm not living a pessimistic life. I do encourage you to go into politics. I would vote for you, Sam.
I don't have a choice.
That's right. You got to go. Sign up today.
I don't have a choice. When
Okay, I will sign you up.
Sign me up.
But that's only one possibility, right? We can help people like Heiner. We can help people in Malawi, Africa. You know, I was going to end this session, by the way, with saying, if you want to help me help villages in Africa. For years now, I've been helping villages in Africa. I don't talk about it, but I do it. But if you want to help and make a global impact, help me. We'll do it together.
The way that I figure out I'm most influenced when I can help people like Heiner, I can help people like whoever need the help so that they can be leading. There's the best use of my, because I look at the big picture, you know how it goes. When the best, you know, neurosurgeon have problem, they come to me and talk to me about it. I give them a different perspective that they don't have. So that's, I'm not saying that I'm smarter than them. All I can say, I can give them a different perspective that they don't have that may be useful. And, you know, 9 out of 10 times I usually is useful in some way that different perspective. I always say that a problem is only a problem when you don't have the perspective that can solve the problem. So the key can be unlocked by the master key, right? So if you find the right master key, all the doors are open to you. So same way with problem.
May I restate that in a way that I find informative and educational and entertaining?
Please.
That you have a problem is not a problem. That you think having a problem is the problem.
Okay, that's how you think about it. The way I think about it, I'm so glad that I have a problem. So now is to see how many ways I can figure it out so I can find a perspective where the problem is opportunity for learning. So it's like emotional in learning, right? Frustration is a stage of the learning steps. And Barry can tell me what step is when someone is frustrated with a problem, what level are they at?
Well, they're in quadrant 2.
See?
Quadrant 2 is partial knowledge, but negative valence emotion because their knowledge has gaps and misconceptions mixed into it. And it's the gaps and misconceptions that are the cause of not achieving the outcome you are anticipating or wanting or desiring.
That's progress, right? From step 1.
If you're in frustration and you know you're in frustration, that's progress. Because then you can say, why am I frustrated? Where are my gaps and misconceptions that are causing me to not succeed? And then you have to diagnose the gaps and misconceptions. And as soon as you discover what they are or where they're likely to be, then you can systematically fill in the gaps and correct the misconceptions.
See, wonderful. We have in-house expert to do a diagnostic.
So, but you may need help with the diagnosis because you say, okay, here's what I understand and here's what I'm trying to do and it's not working. Sometimes you need a shrink or a mentor or a tutor or a mentor, whatever Sam likes to call them, to diagnose the gaps and misconceptions, or to facilitate the process of diagnosing and remediating them.
But the key here is that you know that you're frustrated.
Yeah.
Unless you know that you're frustrated, all you do is some people just throw a chair over. I never understand the people that throw the dinner plate away across the room. Like
ketchup on the wall. You throw ketchup on the wall above the fireplace. You know that story, right?
Yep.
That's Trump throwing ketchup on the wall because he's frustrated because the outcome of the vote count wasn't what he wanted it to be.
So going back to Sam saying that a problem is a problem if you think it's a problem. How do you bisect that? How do you chunk it down?
Say that again.
Because if you think having a problem is a problem, then you get that frustration that Barry's talking about. But if you think having a problem is exactly the way you describe it, the chance to take action, it's a chance to get unblocked, it's a chance to learn something, it's a chance to help somebody else, it's a chance to change your life, then it's not a problem.
You don't label that as frustration also.
It's what?
You don't label that emotion as a frustration as well.
That's right. That's right.
But when I'm saying go for that, when you feel that it's a frustration, to me, it's that your desired outcome is missed. You're not getting the desired outcome. That's all I'm that's how I label it. You fail means that you did not achieve whatever you try to achieve. So like the same thing with climate changes. If the climate change is getting deteriorated, it's getting worse, that means we fail. We're not getting the outcome that we're looking for.
On the other hand, we have no idea how to value, how to even discuss things at a macro level beyond humanity. All we can talk about is, in a very selfish way, how we as humanity are affected. Humanity has come and gone in various different civilizations for eons. And some of us can even name at least a half a dozen of them. And we're discovering even more and more as time goes on. So it could be that the progress as measured in civilizations is in a interesting trend, even though each individual civilization disappears. And we, the current generation, the current civilization, may disappear.
Well, the civilization is supposed to disappear after a while, right? It's not supposed to stay forever, the same civilization.
That's a story. That's a story we tell ourselves.
How you define civilization? This is constantly from day one?
A relatively consistent society with working culture, working education, a working food supply, a working residential system, a working cultural system. If there's none of that shared, then I would say that's a different society or a different civilization. The Sumerians, the Peruvians, those are different civilizations to me.
So you can move to a different country, a different region, you have a different civilization, then you can live in this different civilization.
Well, in my thinking, no, because we're all interconnected already, and we all are inter-influenced already. A different one would be, let's say, Proxima Centauri. But yeah, the Earth is one global village already, whether we like it or not. even small little 300-person villages somewhere in the, Amazon forest that don't know the rest of civilization, they're going to go down like the rest of us if we, fuck up the planet. Not if, when.
Does it matter if you're not here anymore?
Yes, it does. Because we're all brothers. Humanity, you could think of as one big family. I wouldn't want my kids to suffer. I don't want my kids' kids to suffer. And unfortunately, they're going to suffer. I mean, in the absolute nihilistic view, no, of course not. It doesn't suffer, right? If you take a look at, the billions of years of time that the universe exists on. But we as individuals, we have a different context. We have a context of years, decades, centuries, millennia. So we construct our meaning only in that time frame.
Talk about suffering. Someone asked me will you be the king or the emperor 1,000 years ago, or would you rather be who you are today? I say I'll pick who I am today anytime because I have an air-conditioned car and a Tesla car I can drive. Over there, everything is so archaic and no air condition and no EV and all that stuff. So just for the sake of like suffering, like you may have 1,000 wives, concubine, or whatever you want to call that. But no, I'm rather, so suffering is a perspective. In those days, those are enjoyment, those are not suffering. But in today's world, they are suffering, even 50 years ago. I always remind my wife that we grew up in the survival mode. Our grandparents grew up in a survival mode society. Everything is all in a survival mode, big time. Today we live in an abundant world where a lot of food, we have too much food, from that perspective, a small chunk of the perspective. So civilization is that, yeah.
And not even that, 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, if you were a king or emperor, likely there are people trying to assassinate you.
Yeah. So time does change everything. So I wonder, we have more spirit being in the universe, or the rebirth and all that stuff. We have so many bodies, and my point is that in the spiritual world, we don't really care about climate anymore, right? If
But
you're
in the spiritual world, we don't what?
When you're when we die, we become a spirit or something like that. Okay, when it's a spirit form, you don't really need to worry about the food, about climate change and too cold, too hot. You can live anywhere you want.
I mean, the whole notion of I disappears, or we.
Yeah. You may not know, but it's a different form. It's a different dimension we can't even talk about because we have no idea how to talk about it.
There's no way to collect information about it, so how can we know anything about it?
But I do know is that when you're spirit, you don't really need to turn on the air conditioner to keep yourself nice and cool. If I may say that. That'll be interesting.
There's no way I can contradict you.
What did Barry say? You cannot be wrong or something like that.
Yeah, you're not even wrong. That's right. Well, for as much as it's gone, I really appreciate the leaning in on the question that I asked. It doesn't have to consume all of us, but I appreciate the interaction on it. I actually find it amusing that at times my questioning, my asking, appears to imply certain things to certain people, but that's okay.
There's an embedded set of assumptions which may not be obvious. So the assumption that there's exactly one dimension, pessimism versus optimism, I rejected that and said, no, there's a third dimension. There's a normal exit from that particular assumed dimension.
So question,
by the way, that is a recurring feature of the technical work that I did, that people came to me and said, Barry, we're stuck between A and B, and we can't figure out which one to do. And I'll say neither. There's something you haven't even thought of that's going to be better than both. And I had to always invent the excluded middle. I always had to envision and invent the excluded middle, because the solution wasn't anything that people were already considering between, say, A and B. Neither.
So Barry, I also think it's interesting that because I ask a question along a dimension, that it seems to imply that that's the only dimension.
Well, yeah, you could, yeah, none of the above. See, you know, this whole thing about voting for none of the above. In some countries, you can vote for none of the above. In the US, we give you the Republicans and the Democrat. You can't say none of the above. It's not on the ballot. And yet, if you ask me, what do you want in government? I'd say none of the above. None of the ones you're offering me. I want something completely innovative, novel, forward-looking, progressive. Josh has his hand up.
Thanks. I was trying to get a reference to what I was about to say so that it didn't go deaf, because sometimes I feel like I say something and if it's not familiar or thought about, it's, oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. And it just goes by. So I'll put it after I say what I say. But having a structure to talk together, I would love to bring into the conversation the Penrose 3-world model, and using that 3-world model. Are you guys familiar with that? There's
not by that name. I may know.
I think we often jump between those different models just naturally in these conversations, which is, you know, the physical model, the mental model, and then the model that was created mathematically, or the Platonic model. So it'd be nice to know where we are. And then Sam Chan just brought in the spiritual model, which is a 4th world model. So maybe we could talk about the GCC 4 world models at some point. And with that, I'm complete. I just wanted to bring that into the mix. Are we talking about something that's physical that we can measure? Are we talking about something that's mental that we can conceive? Are we talking about something mathematical we can try to calculate? Or are we talking about something spiritual that we have no language to talk about?
Or only vague language that people don't know what the words mean. That's the problem with spirituality, is that there's a lot of vocabulary nomenclature, but you won't even get the theologians to agree on what they mean, because the meaning ultimately has to be written down in the language of mathematics, and the language of words isn't very powerful. It's a terribly, you know, imprecise, vague language. And you know, if you rewrite it in mathematics, you're not doing theology anymore. You're doing analytic theology, not narrative theology. And if you go to a theologian and you say, let's do analytic theology, they'll say, I never heard of that. I mean, seriously, people who study theology have never heard of analytic theology. You know, they know about the Word of God. They don't know what it means to say the math of God. Except that Einstein says, I want to know God's thoughts. And he writes down E equals MC squared, or Maxwell's equations, or something like that.
Josh, do you know when this Penrose 3-world model was developed?
I believe it was in 1977. I could be mistaken, but it was in the late 70s at some point. I'm putting it in the chat. Here we go.
Because there's a 3-world model also with Popper and Krejci, and we have here even a Loge house which is dedicated to the 3 worlds. And my issue is how the 3 worlds or many worlds can connect. And to just have mathematical worlds and physical worlds and semantic worlds or whatever does not make sense if they don't connect. And that's what I'm trying with my panorama.
Yeah, I think the language, the world we're speaking right now, we're connecting in the language world, which is very difficult.
Yeah. Often futile.
But you see, this is why a switching system was developed for repositories in libraries, like Library of Congress with UDC or whatever the classification schemas are. This is actually what needs to be done. Otherwise, an AI system cannot really help us to index and point and connect in a transparent way, because this automatic transparent linking through certain catchwords issues and then offering me a nice site to read and study in YouTube or being offered somewhere else is not transparent. That is what I feel is so dangerous now. We cannot follow up on the linking taking place and the recommendations. And my world and what YouTube is offering me is totally different if I would be a block-headed guy in Wichita.
That's where I was born. Yeah. I was born.
It's hard. It's a hard problem to solve, and I think when you're missing information, that's even harder. And I think there's a lot of documents and a lot of things from the Library of Congress that are not getting put into these language models, and it's really scary that they're filtering the data that they're compiling, reorganizing, and asking the computer to spit out as truth is only a fraction of the information that was scanned from all of these books that have ever been written. And a lot of the books that were written were already biased and written to rewrite history in a way that Victor wants you to believe in order to keep the power. So if you keep scanning the books that keep the power, it's a long spiral. And if you look up institutions like Stanford University, look at Leland Stanford, what he stood for, who he was, and what he did throughout his, control to create an institution that kept that control, and what they taught at that institution.
Was his wife when her son died at age 13 while traveling in Egypt. It was Stanford's wife that endowed Stanford University, not the senator or the governor, railroad baron.
Robber baron.
Yeah, he was Robert.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. A robber baron, exactly. And what were those robber barons doing in 1885?
Running the railroads
and working in eugenics. There's a lot of eugenics work.
Well, Shockley ended up as a professor at Stanford, and while he was a professor at Stanford, he was promoting eugenics, and he got into big trouble for it. He lost a lot of stature. He also lost his team at the Shockley Transistor Company because he was a shitty manager. He was okay at physics, but he was terrible at management.
Josh, what you were mentioning is very, very sensitive for me, because it's not only the things which are filtered out, but where the blind spots are. And to find a scaffolding or a grid to see things in perspective was, in my view, first done. I mean, not just thematic and alphanumeric text, was, in my view, first done by Arno Peters. He created the Peters map, the map which is equal area of the world, because he was doing the synchron optical world atlas. And he, every 100 years, for 3,000 years, was showing, like in sediments, in different colors what has been happening in Asia, in India, in Europe, in Africa, in the Americas. And this was very, very highly disputed. And I wonder if you know about it. I can only tell you he died. Unfortunately, there was a high and there was a low because all the academic disciplines were fighting against it, because he brought together from people from all disciplines, and only through Andreas Nöttinger. So you see, I mentioned before that I have now my library soon getting up and ready again in my new place. Andreas Nöttinger is an architect from Switzerland. He went to Vancouver, as far as I know, and he took the idea of Peters and making something like a world history chart. It was brought in cooperation with Encyclopedia Britannica and Canadian Cultural Heritage Foundation, or whoever it was, getting the same idea onto such a wall map. But having this shared idea, how things evolve through cultures and regions, is so intentional, so, how do you say, highly competitive, that they all screwed each other. And Andreas Nöttinger took the liberty to ask Arno Peters if he can use his data, and all his data were scanned by Chinese, to really have it all as an digital electronic Peters, but he didn't mention the origins. He just felt that Peters has told him that he can use it, because you see, this was 50 years ago, and Arno Peters didn't have the idea that you can copy it and electronically use it for your own benefits. So the idea to find something which is a blind spot in this area is very, very interesting. And there's an electronic version of that. A friend of mine published it as a book, and it was presented at Frankfurt Book Fair. But all these people are now dead. But the work of Arno Peters is in the National Library of Germany. And I really want to get it out again, because if we don't get this transparency, we cannot see what is a blind spot or what is filtered out.
Thank you so much, Heiner. I'm meeting younger people that are doing the same as these people from the past, and it's really interesting. There's a few people that want to make a timeline that goes on for 800 to 3,000 pages, because it's the nuances that get lost in the spin of the history.
Get this data, and we should cooperate.
Sounds wonderful. I agree.
So you see, next time I will show you Home Story. I promised it to the other guys, but then we went off on another tangent, and I have to leave very soon. But it's good to see you, Josh. And
Yeah,
I will,
Heiner, I was going to say, let's not waste.
close my window. I might listen a little bit more, but I'm on another tangent.
Before you go, I would love to hear your perspective, your view from living in Germany, because the history that I was taught in America is very different. And when I look at the history from different perspectives, it's constantly rewriting what I thought I knew, because I didn't live in Germany in 1920. And what I'm told in America would happen in Germany in 1920 is similar to what happened in a lot of places around the world, but we don't get taught that history in our schools. So thank you I would love to share and listen and understand what knowledge you have.
Well, you had a small little Hitler also in America in the 1920s. There's presently a television series about this here in Germany, but it's done normally with Arte in the German, French, Francophone speaking world. So it is hidden through geo barriers, boundaries, geocoding, they call it. It's just kingdoms of private information. So we are all in this together. No, let's try to meet more Sundays and Saturdays. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Hunter. I hope to see you soon too.
Well, since it's close to the top of the hour, I'll close myself with another repeat of the invitation. If you want to say act and indicate, there's more to follow up on than just the conversation we have here, one of the options is to join me in helping villages in Africa. So this is an extension of what Michael Josefowicz had done with people in Malawi, and I continue that. So get in touch if you'd like to help contribute. And with that, I close for today. You guys are welcome to continue.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh, for the Roger Penrose's 3 worlds and 3 deep mystery theory.
Welcome. That was brought up by my ontology club this Friday.
Ontology. The way I think about it is that you're having a different engineer working together. So you have a carpenter working with a plumber, working with a welder, working with all that. So different perspective. There's no way you can cover them all because, every representation is only a perspective of whatever the true thing is. And the more perspective you have on it, one of my favorite chapter on my 5th grade textbook was about, I think 4 or 5 people looking at a pine tree, the artist's perspective, the carpenter's perspective, the merchant's perspective, the squirrel perspective, and all the different perspective. And this is the pine tree. So that's how I learned my perspective from that onward.
Sam, what you're saying is so exciting. I call it worm's eye, fish eye, bird's eye, group eye, generational eye. But please, maybe you make a screenshot. This is this book. It's called Digital Peters.
Give me a second.
And it has
Back it up a little
CD.
bit behind the camera so I can get a picture. It's a little too close.
No, I think I can make a few scans. But
Yeah, email to me. You have my email, so email to me.
But, well, you see, this is how it is done. And it has a software and it has the original data to do statistics.
Heiner, what's the name of the book? You threw it so close to the camera I couldn't see all the
And
words.
these are the original charts, which were then put into digital by Chinese working with that for hundreds and thousands of hours.
Wow.
And you can do statistics with it and whatever. And there is a CD going with it.
Wow.
And it's really good to be done in your local neighborhood for your own data.
Nice.
But more important is to get this work done in Germany for 60 years, done in a format that you have something which is repeatable and transparent. So I tell
What's
you,
the name of the book, Heiner?
Put the cover back again on the monitor, on the cameras. Cover. No.
I don't think he can hear you.
Der
I don't think you can hear
digitale
either.
Peters, DE. Maybe it is still online. These
Can you
people
just,
died.
what's the cover of the book, Heiner? Can you hear us?
Der digitale Peters.
Digitally
PET.
Peter. ERS, like the person's name Peter with an S.
Just back it up just ever so slightly.
Here, I'll type it into the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't speak German. I'm so sorry. Peters, I can't spell that. There we go.
Digitally Peters, as in Peter with an S.
So
Thank you, Barry.
I put it into the chat. It's called, his name is Arno Peters. And the URL is, I hope it is still available. Otherwise, you go to Wayback Machine. Der digitale peters.de. That's the URL.
Thank you, Heiner. Thank you.
And with that, you might even get it antiquary. Otherwise, we do some shipping. And I gave the CD to my grandson, so I don't have it at the moment. Otherwise, I could copy it for you.
That's wonderful. That's a great resource, a great book. Thank you for sharing.
I tell you, and it's all not printed anymore. And a friend of mine, he also died. He was doing all this work to put it into the digital format to really make neighborhoods studies and all this. I hope I get it scanned very soon and I can share it with you. But more important is that we share the digital version and then make use of all this lost knowledge and hidden knowledge, the
Wonderful.
unknown and the unknowable.
Yeah, I remember doing research on the internet, and I'll find things and I can't find them later. And some of them were in German, and it was wonderful information. And I was translating it and I could never find it again. So I think it might be that book that I had found years ago.
Yes, it's Krautish. It is Krautish mindset.
Yeah.
Kraut is like sauerkraut.
Outer Welsh.
Yeah, I found a book one time. I think it was in a Japanese store. It was in Korean, and it was the entire sacred geometry of all the parts of the body, of the ear canal, of the fingernails, of all different parts of the body, the heart. And I've yet to find that book again. I don't see it anywhere, but I'm sure it's somewhere in Korea. It's hard to, I think the hardest thing is scanning and finding things that are in different languages. They get lost on the internet.
That is my main concern. There's so much known and it's not spelled out in any Arabic and Western language.
Yeah. And there's so many things that get published and then get taken away. Like right now, I just saw the B-21 bomber is being published in the society, and it's showing our enemies from America that we have such powerful airships. And then 5 years from now, you'll look to get the information on it and it's not there anymore. They want you to know just for a period of time that we are powerful, and then just forget what we showed you. We just showed it to you to scare you for a moment.
The good thing is the storage is cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So you can have indefinite amount of storage. You can still afford it to put in the flash drive or CD or DVD or Blu-ray or whatever that's useful for you.
That's why I'm so excited when you get your AI clip. There's another company, Record, that has a pendant, and I'm looking for the device that I can use. I was talking to my parents and we were having an argument over a conversation from 6 months ago. And I said, I'm going to record all our conversations from now on so I don't have to fight. You said this, he said this. I don't want to do that anymore moving forward. And I think we have the technology to not argue about what was said or not said. And that's why I appreciate recording these conversations.
Remember, when you record it, it's no longer private. Every digital will be somehow uploaded somehow, somewhere.
I've been on the internet since the early 90s. I have yet to think that anything is private. I don't understand how people think that they have privacy when even during World War II, they created a system to track all of the radio waves that are ever received from place to place. So everything has been recorded since the 1950s.
Well, you may feel this way. Your parents may not feel that way. It's like all our conversation, argument, yelling, screaming is on the internet.
They shouldn't argue and yell and scream then.
I remember one time I was in a spiritual gathering one time. It's like, you're not supposed to take my picture. If you take my picture, my soul is with the picture. So you're taking my soul away from my body.
I used to say that to people, Sam. I made an agreement one time. Me and my sister used to fight like cats and dogs all the way till I was 30 years old. And we were working together at a company, and we made an agreement that we're going to treat each other like we treat our coworkers.
Okay.
So, and it's very difficult to do with your sibling because you grew up with them and you know them very well. But to treat her the same, please and thank you, and to treat her just the way I would treat a person I don't know.
Because you practice on each other and how to kill each other.
Exactly. We're experts, expert fighters. She's thrown a plate at my head, and I've thrown physical things at her. So we've fought very hard.
So we tell your coworker that don't even try. You haven't seen me working with my sister, how I deal with her.
Exactly.
You got to be able to throw ketchup. If you want to get anywhere in politics, you got to throw ketchup.
Where is this coming from? I heard you say that earlier about Trump. What is
that on the day of the vote count, the November election, when he was sitting in the dining room of the White House getting the bad news, he was throwing ketchup on the wall above the fireplace in the dining room of the White House.
Yes, Cassidy Hutchinson also told the
Yes.
story.
Cassidy Hutchinson told the story of him sitting there with his hamburger throwing ketchup on the and how they had to clean up the ketchup off the walls because he was throwing ketchup at the wall. He was so angry at the vote count.
wow? That's politics are like a chess game. The rooks think that they're knights, and the knights think that they're kings, and the kings know that they're pawns because they can only move in the same direction. So people think they have more maneuverability in politics than they actually do.
No, they're optimists and they're wrong.
Well, they're gaslit by the people that manage their resources.
Yeah.
They don't have the resources themselves, so they have to look to powerful people who promise them, more maneuvering on the board.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. They want power so they can be corrupt.
Right, but they'll only ever get as much power as the people who put them in office will allow them to have.
Exactly.
That's what you think. That's what you think, my friend.
What's
When
that?
when power corrupts, you get all the power you need so that you can. The best way I can think of power corrupt is that because they're habitual momentum. So when you do something, you think you can do it, and you don't know where your boundary is, you overstep your boundary.
I don't understand what you mean by that, sir.
So it's like, how do I say this in a way that
You overstep the other guy's boundary. The other guy's boundary is ridiculous, but you overstep his ridiculous boundary, and he smacks you upside the head.
yeah. So when you're doing your thing, and before you cross over the boundary, you keep doing it, and then the reason you label as such a power corrupt is because you cross the line. It's nothing more than cross. You're still doing whatever you're doing. I call it habitual momentum. You keep doing what you're doing, except that you ignore or you mistake or you have blindsided the boundary.
Having power means you get to set the boundary.
I've heard a comedian say they're a habitual line stepper.
Yeah, so
I think it was.
that's
Yeah.
power corrupts, and people who have power corrupts, they have no idea they're power corrupting.
Right. They don't think that the line that they're setting is an unethical line.
That's right.
If they were on the other side of the relationship, they wouldn't have liked that line.
That's right.
That's the whole point of the Rawls veil of ignorance. That if you're going to set a line such that you don't care which side of the line, which side of the story you're on.
That's right.
If you say, oh, I wouldn't want to be on the other side of that, against that line, then don't set it there.
Yeah. And the most complicated part of this is that how do you prevent yourself being power corrupt? That's the most difficult one, because it's blindsided, because you have the habitual momentum of doing the line stepping or whatever it is. You didn't do it because you want to do it. You do it because it's a habit or whatever you've been doing. And the question is, how do I prevent myself from being power corrupt? That's the one that I struggled with for many, many years. And I learned from the best, I should say, mentor that I learned from is the emperor in China.
Don't seek power.
Yeah.
Which emperor?
Because emperor in China can chop off somebody's head just a blink of the eye, right? So how do you prevent from doing that? How do you learn from the emperor of China that he doesn't abuse his power, because he has guardrails on? The mom will stop him from doing things, and as such, something like that. Yeah.
You write a children's story called Alice in Wonderland, where off with his head is the refrain of the powerful queen who's corrupt.
Yeah.
I just saw my daughter got a sticker on Halloween for Alice in Wonderland, and she asked me what the mushrooms are and what are we looking at. So I watched the story with her, and it's cartoon for kids, very cartoonish. And then it says "off with your head," and I went, "Oh my God, I don't know if I wanted to watch this. This is so horrible." Off with your head. What happens when she asks me, "Daddy, what does off with your head mean?" I don't know how I'm going to explain that to her.
Yeah, well, it's Alice in Wonderland. It's a children's story.
But it's not a children's story. It's veiled as a children's story. It's a mathematical story.
It's written at three levels. It's written at a child's level, an adult's level, and a scholar's level. And you can interpret it at all three levels.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the Penrose three-world model. Is I think
it's probably the same idea. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Escher had the same thing. Three worlds: superficial and reflection, and then the deeper, the three meta levels.
Yeah. It's
all right. It's time for me to go. Thank you. See you next week.
Let me know when you get your AI pin, Sam.
I will. Thank you.
See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for talking yesterday, Barry.
No problem.
Cheers.
Josh?
See you later, Sam.
Josh?
Yes, Heiner.
I just checked. The digital pages can be bought in Germany for 15 euro. And there are some offers even 60 euro. But there are 2-3 versions, very cheap. And it has a CD inside for about 13 or 15 euro. So I'll check it out and I see if I can copy, if I have the CD, so I can somehow send it to you.
Yes, please. Could you take a picture of the book? Could you take a picture of one of the pages and send it to me so I can try to look at?
Well, no, Sam has put it already into the chat.
No, I know, but I'll look it up online. Let me see if I can see what it is that I'm buying, so I understand what it is.
The website is live. I put in the URL and
It is working.
And the screenshot of the landing page.
Yes, but used booksellers. I'm getting offered 3 copies here in Germany, but sometimes the shipping is very expensive. So maybe
I apologize. We sometimes have a communication problem, Heiner. Is this a book of a timeline? What exactly is this?
This is a book and a digital version. If you open the link Barry was sending to you, then you
Yeah.
see all the technical specifications.
Give me 1 second if you're not in a rush. Let me open this link.
No, I've finished something here, so I'm back.
Okay. Okay, let me grab the link here.
Yeah. Let's just see.
There it gives you all CD, how big the software is to do your own software for your application and so on.
Google should be
So-
able to translate this page too.
Oh, sure.
I haven't checked out the Google translation option here, but it should exist. Here it is, translate.
So if you go into the details of that book, then you see it is done by Hans Behrendt and Thomas Birch. And they have been doing or they were owning the largest book, no, not the largest, one of the main alternative, very successful, large publishing houses. It was called 1001, but they went out of business and the website and all is not online anymore. But it was really done state of the art at the Frankfurt Book Fair. So I think done by very special good operators that it is very easy. Anyway, if you ship it in the world from Germany or from Europe, it is €8 for shipping, but it might take some time. I think it's best that I try to get a CD here and try to copy it. If it's
Okay,
not,
I'm translating the German right now, so it's the website's not working very well. I can't go to other pages, but the homepage came up.
okay.
So I'll look into it.
So we achieved something, and let's talk during the week or whenever you want, or we make another session.
Sounds great.
Take care.
Cheers. I'm trying to translate from German to English.
Yeah, I
Well,
tried in Google.
We have Barry for that.
Well, I tried
No.
to tell it to translate from German to English, but it didn't seem to understand how
It
to
says
do it.
Digital Peters is a history software released in 2010. The world map of time map 5,000 years of. Okay, this is what I think it is. Okay, that's what I thought you were.
So you
Time not
see-
as a line, time stream. I remember you telling me about that before, Heiner.
Yes, you see,
as a
Arne Peters was somehow like a neighbor for me when I was living in the early 80s in Bremen. And in the articles about him, when he died in an eulogy, he was called polyhistor. And then I got very alert because I only knew the word polymath. And then I learned there's also a polyclete. And I think we have to go beyond the autistic disease nowadays to people who are also polyclete and polyhistor.
Yes.
And next time I'll show you a great book about a polyclete.
Okay, great. Yeah, I need to learn German. I think it's there's too much information in the German language.
Let me see, the book might be even in English. I'll bring it. Here. So you see, that makes a library worthwhile. Then you immediately find something.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, we're about to move into a very interesting time. I've been preparing. Oh, let me take a picture of that. If you go backwards a little bit, you're too close to the camera. If you put it towards your face, there we go. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
you cannot make a screenshot of that.
I did. I made a screenshot. I made several. It's wonderful. I actually, Heiner, I've been playing with, do you happen to have Macintosh, like an Apple device?
Yes.
I just started using the connection from the phone for FaceTime to
Mhm.
the television screen. They've connected it now where you can put your phone next to the TV as the camera. And it's really changing my life with the ability to have better video calls, like Zoom calls.
Well, I have a very large Samsung monitor, so
Okay.
I cannot really put it onto my large screen, but maybe that's another good reason. Anyway, this book, this is a booklet for it. The
Okay.
polyclate is from a museum of old plastic museums. So it is the sculpture in the Greek classic. And it's a fantastic book over 700 and more pages.
Nice.
It's really something. That's what we need. We need people who are hands-on and who cannot only write words, but do something.
Nice. Well, look forward to talking to you guys soon. Cheers.
Bye. Polyclet. Looks like a Greek. I think you're muted. You're muted, Heiner. Polyclet. Well, I gotta tell. I gotta tell Sam that we ended at 18 minutes after the second hour. I'm gonna leave. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.